Dr. Chopra is the founder and CEO and chairman of Midwest Institute for Minimal Invasive Therapies. Dr. Chopra, I'll leave it on to you next.
Good morning, and thank you. Thank you to the RBMA, thank you to the SIR for having me speak at this session. Some of you folks may or may not know me. I've been part of the RBMA for quite a while, and the SIR. At one point, I was kind of the liaison for the SIR with the RBMA. Miara, can you hear me well? Just making sure you can. Excellent. So I'm an interventional radiologist, to say the least. Been doing this for 30 years, but also an entrepreneur at heart. And years ago, 2003, I was the chairman of radiology at Rush. Before that, I was the chief of interventional radiology, ran multiple programs, worked at the Brigham and Women's, Syracuse, SUNY Upstate. It's all on my CV, of course. But the important point here was that just somehow it didn't make sense of how do we, IR could never break out. So I founded MIMIT at that time. It's grown into a multi-specialty group, et cetera. We'll talk a lot about it, but wanted to get myself started on this. A tenured associate professor of radiology at Rush, but spend half my time being a entrepreneur in healthcare, in IR, and the other half still very active clinically, do a lot of procedures, all mainly outpatient. And sure we'll have a fun discussion.
Dr. Chopra, please feel free to start.
All right, thank you. I know 45 minutes, and I'll be sharing with you some of my thoughts as of how I approach this more as an entrepreneur. So, as we look at this, I'll try and make it where it's not too micro, as this is how you code something, and this is how you do these little things. But I'll be at a higher level and present to you how we did some of the things we did, and go from there. So it's really about leadership and management in the world of interventional radiology, so to speak, as we are today. If there's any questions, feel free to shoot them, and I'm sure Miara will send them to me as well as moderator. And then, so MIMIT Healthcare, which we have today, we call it Enlightened Healthcare, and we are mainly based in the Chicagoland area. I founded this back in 2003 after being kind of tired of being within the hospital environment, but also where there was no alignment. It wasn't patient-centered. And it all started because a friend of mine, his dad, had a prostate CA and then had a lung lesion, and it was scheduled for a biopsy. And he called me upset. He goes, what's wrong with you, interventional radiologist? And I said, what do you mean? He goes, you know what? I'm told my dad needs a biopsy. The doctor would talk to me. Some lady showed up, stuck a needle. All of a sudden, now he's got a pneumothorax. Now he's up in a hospital. Now some pulmonologist is throwing something. Everybody's freaking out. Nobody knows what's going on. Then there was just no patient connection. Next, he was in the hospital for 5 days. And this gentleman, this friend of mine, was also a senior executive in a medical device firm. And it occurred to me, I said, we're so connected out in the world. Companies are selling stuff to us all the time. Why is it so bad in healthcare? And at that time, I decided we needed to do something different. And I decided we'd break out. And so I founded MIMIT. At that time, we started solo, one hospital, had a clinic, did all that. And it was strange that I grew up as a physician, but it was as a radiologist, somehow it's not good to have a clinic. And so the first thing we did was have a clinic. And from there we grew to today. We have 7 outpatients clinic in the Chicagoland area with multiple skilled facilities, hospitals, long-term acute care facilities, and we're a hybrid model, if you would. Our focus obviously is minimally invasive and targeted treatments. We have multiple different specialties as well, but we're primarily IR based, and we've been growing fast. But we've also adopted technology extensively, and I say from meditation to AI. This is our management affiliated. This is something I founded, where we look at all parts of the world of dealing with healthcare, so to speak. And I'll kind of give you a little bit of a flavor. So, what does Mimid Healthcare do? Essentially, we provide patient centered, connected, collaborative care. I call this the Amazonification paradigm. There's almost nobody, and it's becoming a global phenomenon where Amazon has not touched you somehow. And years earlier, I had learned the triple constraints of life and project management, and it was that you provide, to do things better, faster, and cheaper. And there's best of practice and systems across all different industries, and we started to pull that in and start really doing holistic, which means everything included, not just one or two things, and we call it an all-encompassing approach. And the goal is, and we've had patients since 2003. I have patients and their families that still come to us. So we like to believe that patients trust us to help them lead their healthy lives. And our main focus, we do a lot of arterial work outpatient. It's 60% cheaper than in a hospital. We have facilities that, and for different organizations that call us and ask us to be part of, their program, so to speak, and provide the services that we want. So when you think of a company like Amazon, the way it started, and you have Jeff Bezos today is almost a trillionaire, and this Amazonification effect is huge. It's happening everywhere. If you look at it, you're buying everything off your device. Every generation's doing it. Kids have phones, grandmas and grandpas have phones, and this is coming over into the healthcare space. So what that really has happened is this better, faster, cheaper innovation challenge is coming everywhere, and definitely coming to the healthcare space. And I call it the Amazonification of healthcare. We've been living through this for the last several years, 5 years. About 2007 is when I decided we would be doing something like this. So the first thing is, you're not in the world is in you. You look at the world from our paradigm, from how we are, and every individual, you, me, anybody else, could be a patient. And business is about exchanging value between two people, human to human. And at that point, you start seeing is, why is it so difficult for me to get an appointment somewhere? Why can't I text Amazon, Costco, anybody? They're talking to me all the time. But when it comes to a hospital, no. When it comes to something related to healthcare, it's got to be difficult. So we started to change that a little bit. We are wall-to-wall Salesforce. We're a poster child for Salesforce. We've used all the existing technology. I'll be sharing some of that. We've used it as a platform in terms of digital transformation. But the first thing is you want to acquire patients. How do we attract them? People just talk about, oh, we have to market. Somebody puts a billboard, somebody puts up, but there's a bigger a system in place of how do you attract a patient, where do they live, what do they do, and then how do we serve them? We call that client fulfillment, and then keep them engaged, just as the rest of the world is engaging you, and that's the patient-centered healthcare. Patients, we as people live in communities, so we started focusing on communities, and that's how I started with one clinic. And then now we are staying within these communities, finding what their needs are and actually meeting them. Started, as a radiologist and IR, it's not just about doing a procedure on a leg. It's not about changing the tire on a car. It's a human being. And people feel before they think. We all feel before we think. And that's where the spirit, mind, and body comes into play. This has been around for centuries. So we started applying those principles, if you would, taking care of their needs and focusing on the community. This phrase has been around forever: think global, act local. And we started to apply those principles. And here's what we did. We said, the patient's our customer. The secondary customer is the referring physician, whoever else they go to. And we need to manage all those, but it's all centered on the patient. What the patient wants is the truth. That's their truth. And so we started saying, okay, how do I stay connected with the patient? We have a 360-degree view of the patient, not just their medical history. We have patients who, you do $1 million procedure on them and they go home and they're homeless, or they have other social determinants. How many radiologists and IRs track social determinants? Yes, we do angiograms, but the leg is attached to a human being. They have feelings, they have stuff. They have other physicians, and fax is kind of the biggest enemy. These little pieces of paper, while the rest of the world is communicating electronically, and all of this data has to be able to be used for some kind of insights for the future. So keeping the patient in the center, we started coordinating care. So we have care coordinators, we have patient journeys, so we have patient liaison. We deal with our referring physicians, so we have used marketing automation and other successful tools to kind of do that team collaborative efforts. How do we educate integration and interoperability? You all know, I've seen the list of attendees. All you've been in management for a long time, 10 to 20 years of experience. Some of you are consultants, and you know how many different systems. There's a radiology information system, there's a EMR, there's some other system somewhere else, a revenue cycle system. All of these in silos. Everybody wants to be the source of truth, but everybody's forgotten the patient. We changed all of that. We kind of got ourselves on one platform, and we use that platform and whatever other technologies there are. And the beauty of being an entrepreneur today is uh, software as a service. You could, as a small entity, you can have what $1 billion organization has. That's the fun part of multi-tenancy, et cetera, that we have. So we adopted a customer-centric, mobile, connected, and collaborative paradigm around a digital platform. We chose Salesforce Health Cloud, and it tripled our productivity. We whether it's voice, whether it's texting, whether it's email, contact center, everything's connected. And we want to be what's hyperscalable. Look at the Ubers of the world, Airbnbs of the world. How do they do that? And focusing on this platform enabled us to go through a digital transformation journey. We've been doing procedures for hundreds of years, right? In whatever form. Every year they come out with a new X-ray machine or some form, and we talk about data, we talk about registries. How do you really make this happen with the patient at the center, that it actually adds value? We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. And it soon became that if you have a digital culture, there's data literacy across the board. You democratize the data, which means my front desk person can chatter and talk with my billing clerk, the doctor, the nurse, and the patient, and the referring MD, all while you're right there. You can send a text to a patient, text to a referring MD. The technology exists. How do we manage this thing? We talk about marketing. Marketing is just understanding your market, but what we need is, in the management paradigm, it's how do you acquire customers? How do you acquire patients? How do you get them? If you're talking about veins and arteries, or UFE, what kind of mechanisms we had. So now with COVID, we've gotten into this Zoom paradigm, digital paradigm. Did a webinar, got on TV, news channels picked it up, and that same day we started getting phone calls. From that same phone calls, we've already scheduled procedures. How do you manage that entire process? How do you manage the relationships with the physicians? How do patients access us, and what happens? How do we manage all this referral? How do we onboard patients into us? This is lingo that most medical organizations don't even use. And then we've got designing apps now where a patient can actually log into the app, connect with their care coordinator, connect with us, look at journeys. It's not just about scheduling an appointment here and there, but actually keep staying connected with them. So as we started to look at the patient journey, we said first we want to track them. So how do we get them to come to us? How do we serve them so they get kind of addicted to us? And then we keep them engaged so they don't forget us. And we want to be a solution for them. So marketing to patients, getting referrals from other doctors. If you are in a network, especially if you're in a hospital or care, how do you manage that network and really connecting with people within that? how do you serve these patients? So have a contact center versus, can they text you, can they call you, is the call recorded, etc. And none of this has to be millions of dollars. This can be done fairly easily these days. How are their cases managed? Then we see patients wherever they are. Where do people live? At home? If they're not able to stay at home, they'll go to some long-term skilled facility or a rehab place or whatever. If they're ill, they'll go to a short-term acute care, which is a stack, which are the hospitals we talk about. If they still need stuff, they'll go to a long-term acute care. We go to all of them. We track their journeys through all of that, but then also provide support. Now with we've had telehealth for quite a while, but with COVID, it became very important. For example, we do a procedure, next day we have a telehealth visit with them. They can take pictures, send it to us, and we stay connected. But while we are engaging with them, make sure that our care team is collaborating. So every patient gets a care coordinator, if you would. Each one of them has a care plan around the process, because they may have diabetes, they may have arterial disease, they have a wound, they may have venous disease, and there are different teams taking care of them, and we keep them going. Also engaging the patient in these conversations, making their life very much easy, and whatever else services we can do for that. To do most of this, especially in today's day and age, it's not just about doing another fancy procedure. It's just not, I can blow this balloon up better and I can bill a little more and now I got a different code. It's how do you get the right information at the right time to the right people to make the right decisions and work your way from there. Now, one of the paradigms of being an entrepreneur today is you can't do this just manually with paper and the other way, and you can't do this without information and which converting into wisdom. What should I be doing? So for years, we had pieces of paper, we had images, we used to scan them, we digitized them. So there was the digitization. You took analog, made it digital. Then came where we had PACS, we had EMRs and things like that. It was digitalization where we said we are using a digital process. I've been entering data in the Cerners and the Epics of the world for 20 plus years. I mean, I was at the Brigham and Women's back in 89 to 90, and they had an EMR then. They were one of the first. And all that data that has gone in for 30 years, I can't remember one good report, one good insight coming back to me saying, hey, based on this, do this. This is where digital transformation comes in. You all use your phones. If you search for something, suddenly you're looking at an article, and now you have the site telling you, you may be interested in this. You may be interested in that. They get to know you, and they're looking at your behavior and looking at your insights. And based on that, seeing what can we do. We call it actionable insights. And so we started to apply that as well in this. And there's an important thing to understand about data today. So, in terms of data literacy, understanding what data is, how to democratize data across your organization, create a culture, if you would. So we all know the phrase, we've been hearing it, data is the new oil. We know combustion engines. We know why oil is so important. That is data today. So if you have just oil, and just some technology, which is a spark, all you get is an explosion. But if you take the right kind of processes, the right technology, put the right people together, and then you know what to do with data, then it becomes super, super powerful. And you hear this thing about data is the new oil. And you'll see how we've been able to apply that slowly. And this is the new entrepreneurial paradigm that we live in. So you may have just discrete data. We have tons and tons of that. You look at it, some of it gets processed to some degree where it's collated, curated. That's the information. So we may have, and you see how many studies go there. You talk about registries, you talk about coding data, you talk about all this other stuff. Once that is applied in our minds, and now it becomes knowledge. I know this information. But now comes the important part. What do I do with this? And that's where wisdom comes in to say, hey, based on this data, this information was collected. Now we know this, but this is why we are going to actually go ahead and do the following, and then work our way through this. So we had to ensure that this is not just, and this is an important point, because in healthcare, it's all about buying some new software, some new system. Everybody's selling something new at a higher price. In a $4 trillion economy, we still don't have, as a healthcare system across the country, the best system in the world, but we spend more than Germany's GDP, entire GDP, just on healthcare. And part of that, I feel, is because it's just about keep buying new technologies, and it's a technology transformation versus an actual data digital transformation as to what wisdom can I get out of this data and how do I do this. The second important part as an entrepreneur is the only thing constant is change, and comes, how do I manage this change? How do I create a culture of continuous learning and innovation? And we live in the fourth industrial revolution now. And all of you, I'm sure, are, part of uh, groups where you have physician leaders, you may have a board, and we did some survey initially. And physicians are like herding cats. I'm one of them, and done this for a long time now. And sometimes lack of leadership, and we'll talk about that in a second too, how it really impacts. But talking about this digital transformation, here's our EMR. We talked about interoperability. We chose a platform, and we've got, whether it's storage, voice, how to teach, a knowledge base, project management, AI tools for dictations, et cetera, integrated all of this and really drives hyperscalability. And this is not some very fancy, very expensive solution. It was taking what we had, but to have the diligence and the courage to kind of go down this pathway. And we actually created a mini healthcare system, if you would, on this platform. And we started integrating everything together on a technology stack as we started to think of this. And we knew that this is what will help us succeed. Now, one of the key things I'm sure you've had, if there are some questions, please feel free to shoot them out so we can start discussing that as well if you do. One of the key things that people, especially you'll have young physicians in a group, if you're a radiology group, IRs are the biggest challenge for most radiology administrators, and I'm sure some of you are chuckling and laughing about that. Why? Because, we think we are like Navy SEALs, and we are working in a local police department, and we want the local police department to be like Navy SEALs and jump out of planes because we find that exciting. But, what really happens is, and most of us, IR especially, feel we're entrepreneurs, we like taking risks, we like doing that. And most people don't even understand what being an entrepreneur about is. It's not just that fun, but it's really that you're taking risks and that you're going to have to organize, provide leadership, find out what exactly it is we can do, and then be part of an enterprise and run it. So being an entrepreneur is really about understanding risk and then providing the leadership and management around it. I've had countless calls from guys saying, hey, I've already bought the building, I've already sent lease, I've already done this. Where's your patient going to come from? I don't know. Do you have a clinic? No. Do you even have a tax ID? No. Et cetera, et cetera. And then they go to somebody like you folks in the management side and make some demands, or something else goes on. And there's a lack of information and understanding and education around it. I learned this a long time ago, is you lead people and you manage things. Now, why is that important? Because people have feelings. We as humans have feelings, and people have to feel good at the same time of knowing what to do to be effective. So say effectiveness of those you may have heard Dr. Stephen Covey of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, is people feel before they think. And to be effective, you need knowledge, skill, and the desire to do it. And if some people, for anything to be done, you need to know that I feel like doing it, I know how to do it, one without the other. Things, you can move them all day long, they don't mind, they don't care. But the minute you move a person around and you jerk them around even for 3 seconds, they'll start getting mad. And that's when the fights start in the groups and all the other issues that come around in that paradigm. And what it really comes down to, in my mind at least, is that at all levels, they talk of B2C, business to consumer, business to business. It's essentially all human to human. It's all one human being motivating another, as a physician, as a business manager, as a leader, as a chairman, whatever you want to, whatever the labels are. So it's about motivating people, motivating patients, motivating doctors. How do I motivate a doctor who sees a patient to send them to me for a vein procedure, et cetera? And it's all about how do we influence others to do what we want them to do, which is the essence of leadership in this place. And just as a little sidestep is that I've always believed no one's left this planet alive. When you're born, the universe gives you two sentences. One is a death sentence. You will die one day, as everybody will. And the second is you're imprisoned in this mind and this body till you die. Now, do your best within the laws of nature and the paradigm of gravity and everything else. So I think with that in mind, we know that mankind's mission is preserve life and make it better. We don't like people dying. We don't want to die. And while we are alive, we want to have a great life. And it's about first physical survival, emotional survival, intellectual survival, and leaving a legacy. This is from Dr. Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits. He talks of live, love, learn, leave a legacy. This is what patients want. They want to feel well. They want to feel cared for. They want to be involved in their care, and they are learning about this, and that ultimately this is good. So one of the beliefs, again, as an entrepreneur in today's day, if you watch, I'm sure you buy at Costco. There are very few who don't. I'm sure you buy at Amazon. You look Uber, somebody or the other has taken an Uber, and Airbnb, et cetera, et cetera. What's different about these organizations? Why are they growing so fast? Look at Salesforce, it's exploding. The first pillar that I've learned is that they will provide you excellent product, whatever the product or services, state-of-the-art products, state-of-the-art services. They will keep their customer very happy. There's an intense customer focus. You go to Costco, you may have bought something 2 years ago, they'll take it back. They'll make sure you're happy. They think of you as a member. We at Mimit Health look at every patient as a member of our family. We call it Sangat, Sangat, which is an Indian word for community. And the next thing is they'll keep your customer happy, what we call customer happy. You can't get these two without excellent employees who are happy and satisfied. And then comes fiscal responsibility, which means they will make money, but they make sure the customer gets good value. You go to Costco, you get addicted to them. You go to Amazon, you get addicted to them. They compete and collaborate. Healthcare, totally different. We're changing that paradigm slowly and steadily. The fifth one is that they constantly innovate. If you look at Amazon, they are unbelievable in their passion for innovation. Most places get one innovation and they stick to it. They add a little change on it, a little bit here and there, and just kind of, they call it innovation, but it's not. This is disruptive, where they're constantly enhancing the state of the art. And the sixth is they constantly sustain the other five. And in this paradigm, you cannot fail. It's hard. It's not easy work, but it's hard. Now, one of the other places where we've used as helping us is this is called the 7 Centers of Management Attention. Michael Berger wrote this book called E-Myth, the Entrepreneurial Myth. And he describes these 7 centers, and it makes perfect sense. First is leadership. You need to know where you want to go, how you want to go in today's world. I want to open an OBL. What does that mean for you? What is success for you, et cetera? And what's your vision around that? And then strategic planning is, how do I go from point A to point B? And then how do I manage that? Most people think marketing is, I'm going to put an ad. Well, really what it is who are you going to serve? Who are your customers? Who are your potential customers? What's your market area? Then money is the lifeline. I've seen so many OBLs and physician practices. They just go out and do stuff and they have no idea how to manage their revenue cycle. They probably don't even know. They just know I have a biller or something else like that, or they'll be yelling at some manager to do some billing. But what's the accounting system? Do you have a budgeting system, payroll, revenue cycle? All comes in the money domain. Management is about all the other things in terms of systems. We'll talk a bit about that quickly. Who are the people in there, how you're hiring, how you're recruiting, how you're running things. And this is more of the internal focus. How do we get patients to come in? Lead generation, that's where advertising, marketing, et cetera, comes in. Once they come in as a consult, et cetera, how do I convert that lead now into a customer? And if they then come again and again, now they are my client. And how do I provide the care? And that's how do I fulfill their needs? So that's described here, so to speak. For years we've had industry, with the medical device industry, try to help us. Oh, we'll market for you, buy this for us, and it becomes a bit of a mess. But with this framework, we've been able to lead our way into what we define as success. So first, center leadership, marketing, as to understand who you're going to serve, money issues, revenue cycle, all the budgeting, everything else, and then management. All this is internal, not customer facing. All this is customer facing, and that customer focus helps us. Um, and because interventional radiology grew out of radiology, not to forget that we are just not just poking needles into people, but actually taking care of people combined with medicine, surgery, however we did that. So leadership becomes extremely crucial. What do we want to do? Who are the stakeholders? Where do they want to go? What is true north? There's a lot of opportunity to take a lot of shortcuts, which all lead to problems later. We've defined our values very carefully. We put the care back in healthcare. Patients get addicted to us. We are addicted to making sure the patient succeeds, and in their paradigm, not just in ours. We then collaborate. We innovate. Learned a lot from Salesforce. We work with them and learned a lot in terms of how to run an organization, and that's kind of the entrepreneur. Because sometimes you think you are in jail in some way. I'm in a radiology practice. I want to do this. I want to do that. And they try to dig their way out without planning and thinking through. And you may find yourself in a worse situation. So you got to think twice, plan twice, cut once. So we went through that. We've created our mission statements, our vision statements. Everybody believes it's not just written for the heck of it. Yeah, everybody does. We believe that people are the bedrock of any community. They want to live happy lives, and that we will do that. So the next thing was, how do we go from point A to point B? Where do we want to be? We determined what are measures for our success, and then created a written plan on how to get there. That was strategy. And then comes, how do we execute this? And some people just get an idea, run to execution, versus say we follow the visualize. What's your vision? What do you want to do? Plan it. How are we going to get there? We plan it twice. Then we implement. So VPI, and then we close the project. So every project's run that way. And execution is about getting it done. So we believe that you have a strong vision, a good vision, you come up with a brilliant strategy, and you execute this very, very well. You can't fail. Unbelievable success. An average strategy with brilliant execution is better than a brilliant strategy that's poorly executed. I've been on a lot of boards, a lot of hospitals, IR programs, radiology groups. They get an idea. They say, "Oh, this is what we're going to do it." They execute it. 2 years later, they're losing millions of dollars, and they say, "How do we do this?" And now there's fighting, there's challenges, and issues that come up. The other thing is systems produce outputs, and most people, when something goes wrong, blame just a person versus saying, "What's the system? What was the input that went in, and what were the outputs that we got?" We believe in what we call the 6 rights. That a good system, whether it's sports, whether it's surgical procedures, whatever you're doing, you'll need the right people within the right processes, within the right structure, to make the right decisions, to get the right information, and for the right rewards. And whenever we see a bad outcome of some kind, we stop. Most intuitively, most people instinctively want to blame another person, his fault, her fault, their fault. We say, no, stop. Look at the system. Were we trying to play baseball in a football stadium with football players, or how are we doing this? So we're very process focused, et cetera. And these are the important tools that are available today as an entrepreneur. We talked about the pillars of success. So within the organization, with this thinking, trying to apply the 6 rights. And you can't do any of this without information. You can't fix what you can't measure. We know that. If I have a temperature, you want to know my temperature. If my blood pressure is high, how high is it? And you have to have measure. And everybody is pushing for that for years now. And there comes that fancy word analytics. And everybody talks about analytics and says, but there's a little framework around that as to the value of the analytics and how difficult this is. We talked about information, data, etc. Most of us are stuck here. What happened? We look at reports, it's all hindsight, but now we then have to figure out how to manage this change, etc. Some get to the next point of why did that happen? What was the reason? But what's more important is what will happen. How can we predict this now with AI tools and everything else? And finally, to say, what can I use, or what can I put here so that how can I say this is what we want to do and how can we make it happen? Kind of the prescriptive analytics, and work our way from there. Now, we are at financial risk, and economics drives behavior. And we as providers, mainly hospitals, physicians, radiologists, etc., need analytics more and more to be successful, because these tools, if we don't apply them, we're not going to be paid for this. And the government, etc., Medicare, if you look at it, whether all the different quality programs they have with revenue, and then comes the ACOs, etc., we have to have the analytics and the tools that we need. In our world right now, I mean, every procedure that we do, we use all the structured data, all of this, all the CRM data, billing data, everything else goes where we actually, all this analysis is done. We feed the data into registries. We use it for our day-to-day, whether it's inventory, our providers, our other people, all paid based on metrics that have been agreed on, decided with them. We also do clinical research, trials, et cetera, with the data mining, et cetera, that goes in. And that's kind of the core that's needed, the intelligence that's needed, as we call that, business intelligence systems, if you would. Now, these are fancy words, but none of these are very expensive. It's just need the courage to kind of go ahead and implement them in our systems. And some of these things, even our care coordinators, we have care coordination, so we know how many patients are in there, what's happening with the plan, how many have been missed, how many have not been looked at, et cetera, et cetera. So, all this put together in today's mindset, it's just not about opening a building and let me start doing some procedures. I want to talk there. At the ground level, yes, there are some of these challenges, whether you're going to do ads, whether you're going to do social media, marketing, what do I do with my billing, all that. But when you put that together at the entrepreneurial level, as a leader, as a manager, you got to be able to work with different people and put all these systems in place. The biggest challenge is patient satisfaction. They're not sad, they're not happy, they don't come back. To add to patient satisfaction is the referring physician satisfaction. The second is, how do I have optimal clinical and financial outcomes? You have a complication, you got problems. So you need to have the systems providing great care. So it's the better part of it. And then the financial outcomes, which is the better, faster, cheaper paradigm, where you actually, our cost is fixed. Medicare pays you the same. You can go and negotiate a bigger price with them. And finally, all want to continue to grow in this paradigm. Now, one of the key things, again, that I've seen time and time again is when you open an OBL or something else like that, it's a startup business. Businesses like Amazon, they are, I don't know how many billion they are, but they till today believe that they are a startup company, and they call it like the first day mentality, where they're constantly thinking like a startup and being agile, etc. But then that's a whole different mindset, and as a startup, you're dealing with different issues. And then as we start to expand and get bigger, we develop systems, we're growing, we're learning, and finally the organization with very mature systems. What I've seen is OBLs, as they're being started, have to think like a startup within some mature radiology paradigms. Or if you're a multi-specialty group, how do you manage this? How do you collaborate with other specialties as well, and in those stages of that business? So we've been able to do this within this paradigm that I described. Everything that I described, we do. I'd invite you to come visit, see how we do this. And we've been able to put this all together. We do 90+% of our work outpatient. We are still in hospitals, etc. Now with COVID, it has become even more important, if you would, to kind of stay out of a hospital for some of these interventional radiology procedures. Just any questions at this point? I can pause for a second before I jump on to other things. Liana, any questions from anybody at this point?
No, currently we don't have any
Okay,
questions.
yeah, all right, sounds good. So, I did run through some of this material to stay within time frame. We have about 9 minutes. If there's any topic that anybody else would like to see addressed, I'm happy to kind of jump in on that and find in. I'd like to show on this slide for a few minutes. One is how we obviously have clinics. We do all the E&M coding, all the details that go into that part. We collect all the data up front to make sure that patients are onboarded well. So first is the evaluation part. This is one of our procedure rooms, and all of this is outpatient, and what we in the OBL and ASC environment. Obviously, do procedures in this environment. You can see you got OR type setup, and we have anesthesiologists. All the data from all of this in a structured way is collected and put into where we can use this for the future. And you can see here that we are doing very complicated stuff within an outpatient setting. People go ahead, you have to keep an eye on cost. It's a very easy way to run yourself out of business where you spend multi-million dollars on these fixed units and do all this. We use a digital state-of-the-art mobile systems, and all of this is mobile, and we land up doing all the different procedures. In terms of inventory management, every single piece of equipment is tracked. We enter it into the database that we have here along with the clinical findings. So I could run a report at any time that says how many patients were done with this particular device, and you can get all the drill down data to the fine level and run the analytics on it, including cost. In addition, in these, we also, what is the lesion, where is the lesion, what is the site? That data goes into the registry. That data can be used for managing your cost. We actually even pay certain providers based on work RVU. So we tie their revenues to the outcomes, not just clinically, but also whether they did all the data, whether reports were done in 24 hours, etc. All this is done on the paradigm that I described to you over there. And you can see, obviously, we do all the equipment, but we try to keep it in the same paradigm that we talked about. A little bit about the imaging aspect of this. All the data, all the images which are collected, it's all digital, of course, goes into a PACS, which is integrated with the EMR. All of that as well goes into a data warehouse as well, so you can run all the different analytics on all of that. So with that in mind, one of the things I've always joked about is you want to keep your eye on where you really want to go and don't get yourself killed. If you're distracted, you can get yourself in trouble. You can also get others in a lot of trouble. And one of the key things to remember today is patients are incredibly connected. We talk about, now the scoring of organization brands, Medicare starting to look at it, and that the reputation that you create when you create a good brand for yourself and your organization has to be on high quality clinical work, good customer service, but obviously very economically viable. And we, work hard to create that. So I know we are about 5 minutes away, Miara, and
Yeah, Dr. Chopra, we did have a question.
yes,
Um,
please.
and the question asked, can you talk a little bit about your EMR and how you input notes and follow-up instructions and other
Okay, excellent. I'd be happy
documentation?
to do that. Let me actually get back um, to a slide where I can show you that. And here we go. Okay. Can you see my screen? Let me share my screen one more time. All right. So the EMR that we use, obviously all the data is structured. We made sure that this was integrated. When I say integrated, means the front end, practice management included, uh, however you want to describe that. All the EMR data, which means when we saw the patients, everything is also in there. Then on the same EMR, and then when we do the procedure, so you'll see here I'm actually doing a procedure. It's angiogram. I'm doing a right common femoral artery puncture. Here we've actually it's tracking where I'm puncturing it. So this is structured data. And at the same time, and there's software that does this out there, we actually get in. So they're tracking this, but it also says which device. So it's click of a button. This is the device we use. Our inventory is tied in as well. And then as we go through this, I am telling them the findings. This also automatically creates my report for me. Just for my own sake, I also dictate a small summary. We actually use a AI-based tool. It's not just the dictation software, though it could be whichever Dragon or whatever you want to use. But we use that, and then that information lands up in this report. This is all within 24 hours. When I leave the room after my procedure, my report is ready. We have somebody verify this. The software also does the coding, but we have a coder look at it. And then within 24 to 48 hours, I look at this, I sign, and it drops to billing. The once that goes through, then it obviously goes through the revenue cycle software, and the revenue cycle is also tied on the same platform with the same EMR. We use MedStreaming, by the way, and I'm not endorsing them in any way. But by tying all this together, once we have all this, then we use Einstein Analytics where it's all on the data. But the front end here, from what the patient was seeing first, what was happening during the procedure, everything's recorded. That's how we do that. I hope that answers the question. If there's any follow-up question on that, happy to answer it. Some of the folks, I'm sure you have my email. I'm happy to put it on there. If anybody needs it to reach out to me, happy to be of any assistance I can.
Yes, Dr. Chopra, all of your information along with Dr. Harris and my information will be available at the end, but please feel free to share it in the chat as well.
Yes.
And as we go ahead and move on to the next phase, if anybody has any more questions, we have about 4 minutes left in this segment. If not, then we will be moving forward to our break session in which we will go ahead and take about a 10-minute break, be back by 11:10, 11:15. We do ask for people to come at least 2 to 3 minutes before 11:15. And within the 11:15, from 11:15 to noon, we'll be doing the live workshop. And in that session, we will have participants actually allowed to talk. And then within that segment, you'll be allowed to share video because we really want it to be interactive. So if anybody has any questions, this is an opportunity for you to ask those questions. I will go ahead and give permission to everyone to talk. I kindly ask that if you don't have any comment, please keep yourself on mute until we come back from break.
And while we're waiting, I can add a few more things here. So, we know that to be even paid with MIPS and MACRA and some of the data that you need, the data that we collect here is automatically uploaded into our registry. So we plan that up front and map that out So we are always been at the upper end of scoring and getting that kind of reimbursements as well. As you know, the MIPS MACRA is a zero-sum game. The people who are getting the extra money, it's being taken from others who are not. And for the people who are not doing this right and they don't have this set up, they can lose as much as 18% because there's a 9% swing. You can potentially gain 9% and you can uh, potentially lose 9%. So we're being consistently at the seven, whatever the upper range is, because it's tiered by year. But just so you know that this data collection up front adds over there. The second thing is, you know how when you have to buy inventory, that's one of our biggest costs. The second biggest cost is our labor, people, and the third is the procedure rooms. And then the analytics that we can do on this helps us prevent. For example, we prevented cancellation rates. So we have patients that come from different facilities, etc. We put in systems with these analytics, we were able to track why they were canceled, whether it was transport, there was somebody didn't take their, NPO orders or whatever. And this kind of system helps us deal with those issues. And also, as we ran clinical research trials, you want to be able to do this very quickly. We were able to do it all kind of in tied with this versus some separate software systems, et cetera, that were put in. Excellent. Any other questions?
Not at this time,
Oh,
Dr.
okay,
Chopra, if it's
very good.
okay.